Hi everybody. I'm on the R3 bus from Maple Ridge to Coquitlam, British Columbia, just heading back from my Weight Watcher meeting. I've been posting these, it's January 11th, 2025. Can you believe that? And I'm posting these videos as a form of therapy to recover from the trauma of watching my little brother, Paul Kierans, 64 with Down syndrome, be locked up by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government and his group home, L'Arche, L''ARCHE, for 588 days until he died alone among people who didn't understand his speech or communication at Burnaby Hospital. So the group home, with the cooperation of the BC New Democratic Party government, terminated our agreement, my agreement with them for visits with Paul. We had visits twice a week on Thursday at the group home, and he could visit me at my apartment on Saturday, like today, from 11 until 7. And he loved that. He didn't want to leave my apartment. I've never seen him so adamant. At the end of the visits, it took everything, every bit of psychological trickery that I could use to get him to leave, to go back to the group home. Understandably, everybody wants to live in a private, personal environment among loved ones. Nobody wants to live in an institution like L'Arche, and no matter what they call themselves, and they started as an SEX cult, so they have no claim to fame. So I fought through the courts to try and reinstate Paul's visits with me, and one of the judges that I was before, Justice Itya Sharma, said to me, the first thing she said is, Ms. Walker relies on some kind of right for these siblings to visit with each other. And I thought, I've been out of the system. I retired as a lawyer in June of 2014, but I didn't think it had sunk so low that the authoritarians would have taken over to that degree. And I went to the Supreme Court of Canada twice, once to try and reinstate our visits, and then to set aside the appointment of my 82-year-old Catholic nun sister in Ontario, 4,000 kilometers away, as Paul's guardian. And that was the first time in history a non-resident of British Columbia has been appointed. It set a precedent, a very evil, bad precedent, because it was the appointment of a member of an institution like the Catholic Church, being 4,000 kilometers away, being the guardian of an incapable, of most vulnerable, incapable adult in British Columbia. This nun the evil nun had never lived with Paul. She left home and joined the convent when he was born. She'd only met him a few times over the course of his 64 years. I grew up with Paul, and I helped educate him because there was no educational institutions for mentally handicapped children in the 60s in Ontario, where we grew up. So I've been on tenterhooks because this week I've been going back to the Court of Appeal on Wednesday, January 15th. After my brother died, when I was struggling with the trauma of watching him being killed, I believe the evil nun, when she found out that I knew she was being investigated for the fraudulent and forged power of attorney over my brother, when she found out that I knew that the RCMP had informed me that she was being investigated, or they were reopening the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney created by L'Arche with the support of the BC New Democratic Party government. She had Paul's ventilator removed. He'd had some kind of brain incident on April 13th, 2024. He was hospitalized, but he was recovering. He sat up in bed, he grabbed my hand and squeezed it so tight until they made me leave. I was only allowed a 10-minute visit with him at the hospital by the evil nun. That, of all the evil things she did, that was clearly the most evil, because he wasn't in the group home. So they couldn't say, oh, well, Kathleen doesn't get along with the group home, so she can't visit Paul. But when the nun found out that I knew she was being investigated, or that the fraudulent and forged power of attorney she had over Paul was being reopened by order of Ottawa, Paul had to die. She ordered that he be killed by taking away his ventilator. He had an oxygen mask over his mouth and nose when I first saw him on April 15th. But on April 22nd, when she found out that I knew she was being investigated, his oxygen mask had been taken away, and he appeared to have been sedated to death. My guess is with some kind of opioid like hydromorphone. So Paul was struggling to recover from this brain incident, but he couldn't. His body physiologically could not handle both having the oxygen mask removed and being sedated. There was no reason to sedate him. He wasn't in any pain at all. He was struggling to recover. He loves life. Paul loved life. He was so happy to see me, and I was so happy to see him. And of course, the evil nun had to bring an end to that. By her thinking, I could see it in her eyes. She wouldn't look me in the eye. She said, "Say goodbye to Paul, he's dying." Like, how would she know? Only God knows when somebody's dying. And she wouldn't look me in the eyes, which is the clearest indicator of malfeasance I can think of. Her jaw was set. Anyways, so when I saw Paul, that after she found out that I knew, because I had appeared in court and told the judge that the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney had been reopened by the RCMP, Paul had to die, because she thought, well, if Paul's dead, there's no need to investigate the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. So I believe she told the Dr. Michael Baker, with whom she was in cahoots, to remove Paul's ventilator, to remove his oxygen mask, and to sedate him. And his little respiratory system could not handle both, having the oxygen mask removed and being sedated, and he died. He was killed right in front of me. Can you imagine having a loved one killed right in front of your eyes, right before you? In a more nightmarish scenario, I can't imagine. So that's why I don't think, not very many people watch, but I post about that every single day. They say about YouTube and about the internet, if you make it available, eventually people will come. And I'm hoping that eventually people will come. So this is part of an attack on the disabled in Canada. We're the new Jews. I'm a disabled person as well. And the hatred and disrespect for the rights and liberties of disabled people in Canada is profound. Canada has, Justin Trudeau's claim to fame was that when he was elected in October of 2015, he expanded, and it keeps expanding, the types of people that Canada will pay regular doctors and nurses to kill. And diminishing the evidence required. So the way things stand now, any disabled person can ask to be killed, and all that's necessary, and they don't even need to ask to be killed. It will be offered to them. Death will be offered to them, a so-called painless death. And all it takes is 2 signatures of any 2 medical professionals. They don't need to know the person and the person's signature. So in my brother's case, the document on which everybody has been relying and which is now under investigation by the RCMP was a forged power of attorney. And as any lawyer or person who's been educated in the law knows, it's the easiest thing in the world to forge somebody's signature. That's all that it takes. There's no judicial oversight at all. When I was a divorce lawyer, I practiced doing family law for 16 years, doing mostly divorces. And you had to wait a year to get a divorce. And about 50% of our applications for divorce were bumped. The court registry prided itself on bumping 50% of all divorce applications as not being up to standard or being irregular in some way. And yet there has not been one case of this medical assistance in dying. And by the way, look up the word medical. It's from the Greek, to heal. And nobody has ever, it's a breach of the Hippocratic Oath where doctors pledge not to harm, do no harm. First of all, do no harm. So I believe that the carelessness and the killing of my brother is related to the callousness of the rights of the disabled people in Canada. And that has made us led to, and I've said this for 4 years now, it's made us susceptible to having our sovereignty challenged by every other country in the world. There's very few countries that practice euthanasia or killing of the disabled and vulnerable well, there's none that goes as far as Canada does. And Canada used to have the highest, most impeccable, unimpeachable integrity and respect among nations. And now we've fallen to the lowest, where Haiti doesn't kill its innocent, vulnerable, and disabled people. But anyways, I'm coming into Coquitlam now, so I'm going to wrap up. Please educate yourself about medical assistance in dying. I've written Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Canadian Opposition Conservative Party, and asked him what his position is on rolling back or recriminalizing murder, the killing of vulnerable and disabled people. And he said he's not going to change a thing. Once the state gets its hands on a power, it will, like taxation. Taxation was brought in as a stopgap measure during World War I in Canada to pay for war expenses. But income tax has never been eradicated since that day. Once they can kill you, they're never going to give up that power voluntarily. We have to wrest that power. And the one other point that I wanted to make is about toxic compassion or toxic mercy, that our inclination to be compassionate and show mercy towards vulnerable people has been weaponized against them. So that if there's 1 in a million vulnerable, disabled, or sick persons that ask to be killed, then it'll be used against every single vulnerable, ill, or disabled person with a threat to kill them if they become inconvenient. The right to die inevitably becomes a duty to die. So pray for me, contribute to our GoFundMe account. All you have to do is click on the link in the description box for this video. I'm going back to court on Wednesday. If you can show up at 800 Smythe Street in Vancouver, you're welcome to be there. I'm fighting this fight. Now they've gone after me. I've been labeled a vexatious litigant for fighting for the rights of my brother and I to associate and visit with each other. So Canada's quickly spiraling down the toilet bowl, and I'm doing everything in my power to keep that from happening to my beautiful homeland. Take care, everybody.